Star Trek Academy Collision Course, Chapter 21. At 0600, slowly in the dawn, the Academy came to life. Small groups of newly returned upperclassmen, male and female, jogged along park trails, anxious to get back into peak shape after either a short liberty or a specialty summer posting to a low-gravity environment. Instructors poured out from the monorail station or beamed into the Erickson hub or simply cruised through the main gates in their personal vehicles. In just over a week, the new plebe class of almost 1,000 young men and women would assemble for a 2-week indoctrination session prior to the start of the first semester. A whirlwind of activity would immediately commence as the Academy's full complement of almost 4,000 midshipmen, from first-year plebes in basic grays to upperclassmen in metallic shirts, dug in and applied themselves to their studies. But that whirlwind was still in the future. For now, the leafy grounds were a peaceful contrast to the inner turmoil Alyssa Corso suffered as she thought about the honor board hearing she faced in 2 days. Z. Bailoff strolled beside her on the path that linked Archer Hall and what the mids called Regurgitation Row, the Academy's food distribution complex. The two dorm mates were wearing their standard gray midshipmen's uniforms. After breakfast, they planned to do research on propulsion faults before returning to Tucker Center and their disassembled shuttlecraft. Alyssa walked head down in self-absorbed silence. "Hey, Corso," Z said, sounding far more upbeat than anyone should without her morning coffee. "Do you remember that first orientation meeting after you got your acceptance?" Alyssa didn't reply, but she remembered. "I was in a group of about 15, Z prompted encouragingly. Alyssa brought up the memory of her first orientation meeting. "Yeah, I was the only one on Risa who got in that year. I had my meeting with the lieutenant on the Lexington. It was the first one he'd given." "That had to be exciting, being on a starship." Alyssa shrugged. "Yeah, I guess it was." Back then, in the full flush of her astonishment at actually being accepted into the Academy, the unsullied promise of a Starfleet career still lay before her. She'd been only 17, yet the crew of the Lexington, at Risa for shore leave, had welcomed her as a sister-in-arms. They'd even let her stay aboard in visitors' quarters for 3 days. The officers had regaled her with tales of their own Academy experiences, heaping welcome advice upon her. Specialists from every department had made a pitch for their particular area of expertise, saying how much they'd enjoy having her back. Captain Korolev had even let her take the center chair on the bridge. When she'd finally beamed back home, she could have floated on air without anti-gravs. To be part of Starfleet had always been her lifelong dream. Now she could lose it. "Did they give you the standard lecture, about what you could expect here?" "Z, I got 3 days of lectures." "The official ones, Corso." "Me, I remember this one part where the recruiter told us that in any other educational institute, we'd be given a standard speech on our first day. The instructor or whoever would tell us to look at the person on the right, then look at the person on the left, and then keep in mind that in 4 years, only one of these 3 people would be graduating." Alyssa nodded glumly. "Yeah, I got that too. It was on a recording in the ship's library." "So you remember what the rest of it was? How for centuries the most elite academies have been completely different from universities and colleges? That going back to the old Naval Academy at Annapolis or the Space Force Academy at Colorado Springs, those institutions didn't exist to drive students out. That after all the time and effort they had expended to seek out and select the best of the best, they were committed to retaining each member of the first-year class." Z gave Alyssa a friendly bunt with her hip, obviously trying to cheer her friend up any way she could. "When we looked to the left and right on our first day, remember what old Superintendent Lee said? It was each mid's duty to do all we could to make sure those same people were at our side on commissioning day. Alyssa's dorm mate tucked her chin into her neck and intoned in a mock impersonation, "Not one member of Starfleet will ever be left behind in space or at the academy." She laughed. And he was sort of right. I mean, the attrition rate here is something like 15%, compared to around 40% at most civilian institutes. And most of the attrition is due to accident or honor violations, Alyssa interrupted as they passed by a free-form flower bed, planted with Martian zinnias that changed color according to the angle of the sunlight. She gave Z a reluctant smile to show she appreciated her efforts. That speech we got, that was for any mid who gets into academic trouble. No one fails out of the academy. I'm not worried about that. Z nodded vigorously. Good, because the point I'm trying to make is that Starfleet wants to hold on to as many mids as it can. You've got the benefit of the doubt working for you, so it only makes sense that the board's going to bend over backwards to find some kind of reason to keep you here. Sure, Alyssa said. On probation, no liberty, loss of privileges. Will you stop being such a drudge? Who cares about any of that? The point is, you'll still be here. And don't forget, at graduation, if you haven't totally screwed up, those records will be sealed. Thanks, Z, Alyssa said quietly. But I'd know. And honor violations, that kind of record has a way of spreading outside the system. Good morning, ladies. You're both looking great today. Alyssa and Z both whirled at the same time to flatten the boorish second-year mid who'd suddenly run up behind them, only to realize it was Jim Kirk. Very smooth, sport, Z said sarcastically. Jim! Alyssa looked around nervously to see if any instructors were near. Do you know how much trouble you can get into wearing that uniform? Kirk threw his arms around the shoulders of both mids and kept walking. A lot less trouble than I'm in right now. Alyssa was not through scolding him. Where'd you get it anyway? Let's just say it was hanging around. I'll get it back before it's missed. You're impossible. That's what they told Zephram Cochrane, Kirk said. Jim, I'm serious. You can't be here. Kirk stopped, and Alyssa and Z stopped with him. Alyssa, I'm serious. I need to talk to you about the board. Before she could argue, Kirk gave Z an apologetic smile. And it's probably better that you don't know about the conversation, just in case anyone asks. Z shrugged, but she didn't look happy to leave Alyssa with Kirk. Thanks, I certainly wouldn't want to tell a lie. You two have fun. She looked meaningfully at Alyssa. Corso, if this starts getting too much for you, just call me and I'll do anything I can to help, okay? Alyssa gave her a hug of thanks. I'll be okay. Enjoy breakfast for me. Z said, read textured protein blobs with syrup. Who'd miss that? She gave Kirk a look that swept him from head to toe. You almost look good in that uniform, hotshot. She winked at Alyssa. Almost. Then Z turned and left, glancing back only once. Wild guess, Alyssa said when they could talk alone. You've got a new plan. Kirk took her arm and propelled her along the path. Let's keep walking, just 2 mids heading for the monorail station. Alyssa tensed and slowed her pace. Why there? Kirk pushed her to quicken her step, kept his voice cheerful. I had a run-in with Starfleet security yesterday. Alyssa groaned. Right. Sam said you didn't come home, and I got visited by some tough guy from HQ. White hair? Named Mallory? Alyssa felt like melting away into nothing. Her shoulders sagged. They know about the staff car, Jim. They know about us. It's all over, isn't it? Kirk's stride didn't falter. No. In fact, it's what happened at Starfleet that made me realize there's another way to prove you're innocent. You mean like the override was going to prove it? Alyssa pulled away from him. The path they were on now wound through a grove of genetically reconstructed elms. Kirk took her arm again, insistent. Mallory's got the override now. You can definitely tell the honor board about it. He'll have to produce it. Alyssa shook him off again and started walking away. Don't worry, I will. I have to. Kirk hurried after her. I know. Will you stop for a second? This is important. Alyssa wheeled around furious. I know it's important. It's my life. And I want to help make it right. All you've done is make it worse. You don't even like Starfleet. But I like you. I want to help. And I know how to do it now. Alyssa stood facing him. Okay then, convince me. Kirk took a breath, then launched into what Alyssa realized was something he'd been practicing. I didn't think of this until last night, but it suddenly came to me that security systems have two separate functions. Keep going. First, they're designed to stop people from breaking into something, a car, safe, databank, whatever. Kirk held up a finger to make a point. But then, because no security system can ever be 100% foolproof, they have a second function. Kirk looked at her expectantly, waiting for her to realize what he'd realized. Not foolproof, Alyssa said, working it out. I know. Their second function is to alert someone that they've failed. Kirk beamed. That's it. That's how the guards came after us so quickly in the parking lot the other night. My override broke through the security lockouts on the car. Alyssa continued, spurred on as Kirk's enthusiasm became hers and her spirits lifted. So the system sent out an alarm saying it had been defeated. She stiffened as Kirk made a move as if to hug her, then didn't. Alyssa bit her lip, relieved. There were other mids on the path, and the Academy's fraternization rules were strictly enforced. Kirk rushed on, not seeming even to have noticed how close they had come to breaking yet another rule. Which raises a really interesting question about what happened in the warp lab. Alyssa caught what he meant at once. The security lockout on the dilithium vault didn't send out an alarm. Exactly. And listen to this. Mallory confirmed that my override worked just like the one that was used to break into the dilithium vault, by transmitting signals to the security system. But to stop an alarm from going out, I would have needed a second piece of equipment to either jam or block the signal. And that second piece of equipment, Alyssa gasped as she understood what Kirk was about to say, and then they said it together, had to stay in the lab. Kirk pointed in the direction of the monorail station. Let's go get it. But Alyssa wasn't yet convinced. Hold on. What makes you think it'll still be there? Because nobody's found it. Yeah, well, I hate to be the one to give you the bad news, but you're not the smartest person on the planet. If you figured this out, security did too. Kirk grinned. They're smart, but they don't have you for a girlfriend. Alyssa hated it when Jim turned on the charm, as she was trying to be serious. And that's important why? Simple. The first investigators checked to see whose codes had been used to open the vault. Your codes. As far as they were concerned, that was the end of the investigation. But I, your boyfriend, no, you're innocent. So I kept digging, which security didn't do. One problem, Alyssa said. Even if you're right, and whoever did it used an override and some kind of jammer, why'd they leave the jammer behind? Why not take it with them? They needed it to keep working so they could leave the lab. Alyssa thought it through, found one loose end. So why didn't they go back and get it during normal hours? Kirk shrugged. Maybe they did. Then again, maybe they haven't had a chance yet because of all the extra security measures they've been put in place. The point is, we won't know until we go look for ourselves. Even if I accept everything you're saying, what I have to do is tell my conduct advisor and then have Academy security check the lab. Alyssa was surprised to see Kirk's boundless enthusiasm suddenly vanish as he became graver than she had ever seen him. Alyssa, I know you don't want to hear this, but Starfleet isn't the perfect organization you want it to be. Alyssa glared at him. This was the one topic of conversation the two of them had promised each other they'd never discuss. They'd had too many arguments because of it. Don't even start, she warned him. I don't want to fight, Kirk said, trying to sound reassuring. But come on, you have no motive. There's no DNA evidence putting you in the lab. And how the hell do they think you got the dilithium off campus? The fact is, you didn't do it, and someone in Starfleet security is making a huge mistake thinking that you did. So do you really want to risk your career by trusting someone like your advisor who's capable of that kind of mistake? That's all I'm saying. That's it. Mallory already told Mallory already told me there was no evidence that I personally stole the dilithium. But they're still making you go before the board. He thinks they'll settle for finding that I didn't protect my codes. That's great. That means they don't think you're a thief. But has anyone from security come and told you that? Has your advisor passed on the good news, told you not to worry so much? Alyssa shook her head. It's a bureaucracy, Alyssa. The cogs start turning and no one cares about the little people that get ground up in them. The truth is, if you want to do something, anything, to change Starfleet's way of doing business, you're going to have to do it on your own. The system's already made up its mind about you, and that system is not about to help. Alyssa stared at him, confused. She didn't want to believe what Kirk said about Starfleet. She couldn't believe it. But she also couldn't argue with his analysis of what the Academy's security investigators had and hadn't done. Maybe every big organization, no matter how well-intentioned, always had a few people who didn't measure up. And maybe her conduct advisor was one of those. Someone who just wasn't watching out for her best interests in the way that Starfleet, at its best, would demand. Alyssa, trust me. This won't be like overriding a staff car. We're only going to look for something that someone else put there. And when we find it, if we find it, then we'll tell someone who can help us. Maybe that Mallory guy. Alyssa took a deep breath. Ground rules. We don't break into anything. We don't take anything. Kirk didn't argue. All we need this time is information. And if we don't find it, Kirk gave her his most winning smile, then you can dump me and Z can have me. You're such a liar. That's why you love me. No, I love you because you're arrogant and insufferable. Two of my best qualities. Kirk pointed down the path. Monorail station? Alyssa made her decision. Chapter 22. After his morning meditation, Spock remained in his private room, continuing his study of classic Earth literature. As always, he was fascinated by the conundrum that study presented. How any culture could give rise to masterworks with the brilliance and sensitivity of Jacqueline Suzanne's Valley of the Dolls and Once Is Not Enough, yet, within decades of their publication, engage in a devastating global war, was an enigma whose solution still challenged finer Vulcan minds than his. Not that that stopped Spock from trying, which was why, for the third time since coming to this world, he once again began to read H. Miller's Tropic of Cancer in a diligent search for answers. In less than an hour, he'd finished the novel, his usual speed reduced by the number of times he had had to backtrack and reread particularly descriptive passages, not trusting them to memory, and scarcely able to believe them. Then, having heard Sarek exit their family's quarters to go to his office in the main embassy building, Spock put on his cloak, felt for the weight of the tracking module in its pocket, and left the room. His father's study was, of course, unlocked. This part of the compound rarely had human visitors, so security precautions were more typically Vulcan, which is to say, there were none. Spock stood in the hallway by the study's closed door and listened carefully. He could hear in the main room the flower duet from the Earth opera Lakme, the 22nd century recording of the Sydney Opera Company, considered definitive by Vulcans. It was one of his mother's favorites. And true to her schedule, she would now be tending the plants on the courtyard balcony. She was not due to teach at the compound school until this afternoon. Knowing he would not be disturbed, Spock pushed the door that opened into his father's private sanctum. The room was dark, the flower duet becoming softer and more distant, all sound muffled by the thick carpets and wall hangings. Spock moved toward his father's desk, an heirloom carved from a single block of Vulcan weak wood. Its polished surfaces revealed the striations of the hundreds of vines that had grown cooperatively, then fused into one organism. The distinctive markings most resembled ripples frozen on a rich sea of mahogany and oak. Sarek's personal computer terminal, which sat on the top of the desk, was installed in a frame made of the same wood, pleasing to the eye. Spock sat at his father's chair and accessed the terminal. He had long ago deduced Sarek's personal codes, more as a mathematical exercise than for any other reason. Even on Vulcan, sons and fathers inevitably fell into competition. Then he called up his father's daily schedule. Spock raised an eyebrow at its extent. It went back 75 Earth years to the first entry Sarek had made when he was the equivalent of 7 Earth years old. But for Spock's purposes, he only needed the details of his father's activities since being posted to Earth. So he isolated just that dataset and captured it on a red data wafer. He switched the terminal back into standby mode, pocketed the wafer, and stood ready to... Amanda was standing in the doorway, wearing a gardening apron, holding soil-stained cloth gloves. She made no attempt to hide her human indignation. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Spock had no trouble maintaining his equanimity. "I am preparing to meet with one of my father's business associates." "Does Sarek know?" "I would prefer he did not." Amanda suddenly looked to her son's wrist. "Spock, where's the tracking module?" "I have removed it." "They could take you back into custody." "Since they have not, it is obvious I was able to remove it in such a way that it did not send out an alarm." His mother stepped into the room, her concern turning to fear. "I don't care that you know how to take off the module. The point is, it's against the law. You know better." What Spock knew was that he had only a few hours to complete the task he had set for himself before his father returned and realized his terminal had been accessed. This was no time to debate with his mother. "Will you report me, Mother?" Spock could see Amanda wring the gloves she carried. "Logically, I should. Ethically, I must." Spock accepted her decision calmly. His plan had failed. He could not blame his mother for doing what she must. She was only human. "But I'm your mother," Amanda sighed. "And one thing mothers have to do is to know when to let go. You keep telling your father and me you want to be treated as a Vulcan, and we do treat you that way, though you somehow don't seem to realize it. You keep telling us you want to be treated as an adult, and that's something your father and I have always worked toward, giving you more and more responsibility as you've proven to us that you can exercise it. But you're so young. You're just 19. Spock wondered if he would ever understand human logic, even that of his own mother. "You don't know how much your father and I discuss you, ask ourselves if we've done the right thing, not done enough. You are in our minds and in our hearts every day, and still somehow you don't seem to know it." Spock had no time to waste. If Amanda was not going to report him, then he needed to go at once. "Mother, I know you care for me. If I have not shown you proper respect for that care, then I regret it, and I will strive to do better in the future." Amanda shook her head as if she couldn't understand him. "Spock, the embassy staff cares for you. Your father and I love you." She waved her hand before he could protest further. "Oh, I know. Love isn't the word you'd prefer to hear said aloud, but it's true. And not even Sarek would deny it. He is so proud of you, has such hopes for you." "I regret that I cannot reciprocate." "How can you say that?" Amanda spoke as if he'd struck her. Spock repeated what he had said earlier. "Mother, I have work to do. If you're not going to report me, then I must go." "There will be consequences to what you're doing," Amanda said, now sounding more Vulcan than human. "If you choose to act on your own, you must take responsibility for your own mistakes. Neither Sarek nor I will permit less." "I am aware of that." He fixed his dark eyes on her, the teenager's challenge to his parents. "Just as my father must take responsibility for what he has done." He left then, before his bewildered mother could reply. There was so much that needed to be corrected in his family and in the embassy, but at last he was free to do something about both conditions and act not just as a privileged son, but as an adult. He was going to change his world for the better. Even at the age of 19, he knew with certainty that he was the only one who could. The Lily Sloan Complex The Academy's warp physics teaching lab was, for safety reasons, located on an artificial island in San Francisco Bay that was linked to the main Academy grounds by a pair of monorail tracks with automated cars. The cars were in continuous operation, ferrying maintenance personnel, instructors, and mids back and forth to the lab. The 4-minute ride was something most passengers looked forward to, because of the startling moment when each car passed through the complex's hemispherical force field that protected not the island but San Francisco from a potentially disastrous warp core breach. There was always an exciting interval in which a monorail car seemed to suddenly slow, then dip into a steep dive, then right itself, as the field softened to permit the passage of the slow-moving object, and the local gravitational field was distorted. No such softening would occur, though, should the Sloan complex suddenly blow apart and the rubble spray out at supersonic velocities. In that case, all riders on the cars knew the force field would remain at full strength and, to an outside observer, appear to instantly fill with fire and black smoke. Such a catastrophe, of course, was a worst-case scenario. The complex's containment and safety systems were maintained at the same readiness level as those on board a starship. Its static warp core, used in advanced instruction for mids and engineering specialist recruits from the Starfleet Training Center across the bay, was seldom operated at full power. Starfleet was not an organization known for taking unnecessary chances. The complex itself was a set of 12 buildings, only 3 of which were generally open to mids. The main lab, called Lily 1, the subsystems lecture facility, called Z Hall, and the warp core facility, affectionately known to the mids and instructors as Ground Zero. The other buildings ranged from monorail maintenance facilities to 2 power plants and a combined operations center that oversaw communications and transporter services and flight traffic control for the island's small landing port. The Ops Center was Jim Kirk's first target. Now that's more your style, Alyssa said, as Kirk modeled his newest borrowed uniform, maintenance overalls. But most of those guys, they're in their 20s at least. Kirk pulled his cap visor down, spoke in a deep voice. Sorry to disturb you, ma'am. You do realize this isn't a joke? Alyssa was already uncomfortable being in one of the Ops Center's supply rooms, sorting through the uniforms of off-duty personnel. Kirk's levity was not reassuring. Sure do, ma'am. Kirk spoke in the same deep voice. Stop that right now, Alyssa warned him. Just tell me what we do next. A smile tugged at the corner of Kirk's mouth, but he obeyed, sensibly. We need to get to a maintenance terminal so I can check work orders. What kind of work? Whatever kind of work had to be done in the warp lab 3 weeks ago before the theft. Kirk made a sweeping gesture in the direction of the door, indicating she should precede him. As soon as we find those records, we find the name of the real thief. There was a bank of maintenance terminals outside the staff cafeteria, and Alyssa followed Kirk as he walked up to it as if he had worked at the Sloan complex for years. Inwardly, she cringed, as he even drew attention to himself by nodding and smiling at the other maintenance workers. He had no fear. Then he reached into a pocket of his overalls and drew out an ID card. Where'd you get that? She whispered, eyes wide with disapproval. It was in my pocket. That's why I picked this one. Alyssa mentally castigated herself again for going along with this. Come on, Alyssa. It's not like it's valuable or has a security clearance or anything. Alyssa grimaced. She had no one to blame but herself. Naively, she had believed that all Jim wanted to do was to check the lab in person, and the only thing remotely wrong with that was that he would have been wearing a midshipman's uniform. There most likely was some kind of regulation prohibiting a civilian from impersonating a mid, but she was sure it had to be a much lesser offense than stealing a Starfleet car. Now, though, Jim wasn't just dressing like an Academy maintenance worker. By using the stolen ID to access the terminal, he was impersonating a worker. That wasn't against regulations. That was against the law. Please, she urged him now, don't do it. But he'd already waved the card past the terminal sensor and a welcome screen appeared. See? He said blithely. I don't have to do anything else. No lies? No misrepresentation? Alyssa felt the hand of doom settle on her and her lost career. Jim was wrong. Just waving the card was misrepresentation. But as he'd instructed her, she kept her eyes fixed on the terminal as other complex workers and staff walked into and out of the cafeteria. Jim's plan called for her to be a student instructor being given an orientation tour. A work schedule screen appeared on the terminal. Whoever Jim was impersonating wasn't due to come on shift for another 3 hours, so it wasn't complete. "See?" Kirk said to her. "The computer thinks I'm early, so it's not even asking me to input a start code." "That doesn't make it right," Alyssa muttered through clenched teeth. Kirk confidently entered a search command. "Starfleet punishing you for something you didn't do isn't right either. And I don't have any trouble figuring out which situation is worse." In response to his request, the screen changed. Now it displayed a maintenance schedule for the main warp lab. Kirk immediately adjusted it to show only the past 3 weeks. "Here we go," he said. "Equipment upgrades." Alyssa looked left and right surreptitiously to see if anyone was watching them, but no one was. Kirk was scanning the screen, moving his finger over it quickly. "Looks like they've already replaced the stolen dilithium with a new shipment. There it is." Alyssa turned her attention back to the screen. "What?" "Read." The paragraph Jim was pointing to was part of the Warp Lab's maintenance log. Alyssa dutifully read the paragraph. On July 15th, the vault had been emptied of 3.2 kilograms of fully expended dilithium. On the 19th, the vault was degaussed, and the holding frames were removed so the interior vault walls, about a cubic meter in volume, could be polished down and resealed. 5 days later, new holding frames had been installed, the security system upgraded, and a new code combination set by the lab's director. Then, on the 26th, 3 kilograms of partially expended dilithium crystals had been delivered under guard from space dock to be locked in the vault for demonstration use in the coming semester. "Okay, I read it," she hissed at Kirk. "What am I supposed to see that I don't?" "July 24th, Kirk told her. "That's when the security system was upgraded, so any device that could circumvent the new system had to be installed either at the same time or between that date and the 26th, when the new dilithium arrived. A 3-day window of opportunity. Simple as that." "Try again." "We only have to find out who entered the lab during that 3-day period. Since there were no classes being taught and no other maintenance work scheduled, it can't be very many, and one of them will be our thief." Alyssa studied him, thinking hard. A little of Jim's explanation made sense to her, but it still didn't solve their biggest problem. "Even if we do find a list of people who entered the lab, then what do we do? We're not protectors. We're not Academy security. I'm just a mid, and you're a..." Alyssa couldn't think how to characterize her boyfriend. "A genius?" Kirk said with a grin. "A teenager like me," Alyssa said bluntly. "The two of us have no power. We can get as much information as we want, but we can't do anything with it." Kirk flushed, his mood darkening in a flash. "I'll do something." At once, Alyssa took his hand. "Jim, I know you want to help me, but this..." She nodded at the maintenance records on the screen. "This is as far as we can go on our own. We need help." She could see Kirk struggle and fail to subdue his frustration. "I would never..." He suddenly stopped, pulled his hand away from hers. They both realized hand-holding had been a mistake. They both looked around the hallway. They were alone. "Something isn't right," Kirk said. "Let's go." They walked as fast as they could without running down the corridor, heading towards the ops center, main doors. The moment they turned the corner, Alyssa's heart sank. Mallory was waiting. Chapter 23. Kirk's first instinct was to run, but then his brain took over and he remembered he was on an island, and the only way off, short of hijacking a flyer, was to take a monorail car deeper into the heart of enemy territory. There was nowhere he could run. "Ms. Corso," Mallory said pleasantly. "James?" He held up the sensor unit of a Starfleet tricorder. The second part of the device hung from a shoulder strap at Mallory's side. "I've been following what you pulled up in the maintenance records," Mallory continued. "For what it's worth, I think you're onto something." Kirk was incapable of giving in to Mallory or to any authority figure, and the fact that he felt trapped only drove him to counterattack. Then stop going after Alyssa. Jim, don't. Alyssa broke away from him, attempting what he couldn't, diplomacy. Mr. Mallory, he was only trying to help me. We were just on our way to see my advisor, and Kirk cut her off. No, we weren't. Mallory looked from Alyssa to Kirk. I see. A difference of opinion. Yeah? You're at the academy, and she's too afraid to ask any questions, rock any boats, Kirk said hotly. But I'm not. Alyssa grabbed his arm to stop him, but Kirk pulled away, walked right up to Mallory. You should know that there's nothing more important to her than a Starfleet career. I have no reason to doubt that. I'm familiar with her file. Then how can you think Alyssa had anything to do with stolen ID codes, much less kick her out? As I told Ms. Corso, the most likely outcome is that the Academy will find her negligent for not safeguarding her ID codes. Separation is unlikely. Can you guarantee that? Kirk challenged Mallory. Jim, please don't make it worse. Alyssa, you can't give in to this rotten system. You're not negligent. You can't stop fighting just because you think it's the easy way out. What do you think will happen the next time they need a scapegoat to cover up something else they've done wrong? Kirk turned to Mallory again. Can you stop what they're doing to her? Mallory didn't move back, just looked curious. Why is that so important to you? Kirk regarded him with scorn. Why isn't it to you? Isn't Starfleet the almighty guardian of truth and justice throughout the galaxy? For a moment, Mallory's stern face cracked into a smile. You haven't answered my question. Kirk blinked, rapidly rethinking Mallory's presence here. Is he offering me some kind of deal? But why? Just as quickly, he realized it didn't matter. Just the fact that an offer might be in play implied there was something he knew that Mallory didn't and that Mallory would trade. He tested his supposition, named his price. Drop the charges against Alyssa. I don't have the authority to interfere in an independent investigation. Kirk didn't believe him. I think you do. And I don't think you know how Starfleet really operates. You asked what's important. I answered. Take it or leave it. Mallory looked amused. You think this is a negotiation? I think it's a trade. Mallory nodded, thoughtful. All right, try this. He turned to Alyssa, who'd gone pale, her posture rigid as if she were willing herself not to collapse. Ms. Corso, I can't tell the Academy to stop the proceedings against you, but I can ask them to postpone your honor board hearing on the grounds that you're helping Starfleet security in an ongoing investigation that might be connected to the dilithium theft. I can also make it clear that security is convinced you had nothing to do with that theft. Mallory looked back at Kirk. Is that acceptable? Kirk shook his head. A postponement doesn't do anything. Mallory disagreed. It lets me go forward with an investigation that can clear this young midshipman of all wrongdoing. If we find the real thief, and if we find out how that thief obtained her codes without her knowledge, then I can give that evidence to the board, and they can stop the proceedings. Kirk saw Alyssa's tense face lighten with relief. Jim, that's our way out of this. Starfleet security will investigate. They've got better resources than the Academy investigators. They'll find the truth. But Kirk wasn't ready to declare victory yet. He looked at Mallory, his gaze wary, measuring. Give me one reason I should trust you. Mallory pulled out his communicator, kept it closed. How about I remind you that you're in a restricted area of a Starfleet facility. You're wearing stolen clothes. You've illegally used a stolen ID card to access restricted Starfleet data on a Starfleet computer system. And every illegal act you've committed since arriving at Sloan is recorded on security imagers. Mallory held up his communicator. I just have to flip this open and make one call, and you'll be beamed up to a maximum security holding cell on Space Dock. I doubt your trial will take more than half a day. And then, if the judge is in a good mood, and if he considers that you're a minor, you'll be lucky to only get 2 years of rehabilitation at the Starfleet penal colony on Mars. Terraforming. I believe the historical term is hard labor. He paused as Alyssa again tugged at Kirk, who again pulled away. The outcome of this confrontation still wasn't clear to Kirk. But, Mallory added, I haven't flipped this open, and I won't for now. Because you're right. The truth is important to me. So, to find the truth, I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt and consider your illegal acts as the well-intentioned mistakes of a misguided youth. Something I will only do once. Do you understand? If there was anything Kirk hated more than being forced to do something, it was admitting the enemy had outmaneuvered him, and Mallory had. Yeah, he said. Mallory's eyes bored into him. I suggest you make that yes, Mr. Mallory. You... Kirk was about to say something completely different, involving words he wouldn't normally think of saying in front of Alyssa, but Mallory snapped open the communicator in his face. Sorry, he didn't hear that, Mallory said evenly. Kirk took a deep breath and, for Alyssa's sake, forced out the hated words. He heard her gasp behind him. Yes, Mr. Mallory. Mallory put his communicator away, spoke crisply. Ms. Corso, you have lab time booked at the Tucker Center. I suggest you use it. Your advisor will get in touch with you about the postponement of the hearing, and we will talk again. Alyssa snapped to attention, still ghostly pale. Yes, sir, Mr. Mallory. Thank you, sir. Then she looked at Kirk, hesitating just a fraction. So much between them still unsaid. Kirk frowned. Just go. I'll call you. Alyssa marched off, and Kirk folded his arms and leaned against the wall. No one was going to make him stand at attention. He was a civilian. What now? Time for your half of the bargain. Mallory wasn't wasting any of his attention on Kirk's posture or attitude, and Kirk knew why. The man had already made it clear who was in command. Shoot, he said. Where's Spock? The Vulcan? Your partner. What? Mallory's stern expression let Kirk know he wasn't in the mood for games. I'm serious about sending you to rehabilitation, kid. Yesterday, Starfleet put a tracking module on each of you. Last night, they both came off at the exact same time. How stupid do you think we are? You're joking, right? Kirk laughed. Stretch took off his module too? Stretch. Spock. I'm losing patience here. Kirk decided Mallory had zero sense of irony. He shrugged. It's like this. You had the two modules talking to each other over a subspace link, so you'd know if Spock and I tried to meet. So what I did was set up a subspace echo of that signal. When I took apart my module and it stopped working, I knew you guys would pick up the echo through Spock's module. Why didn't your module send out an alarm when you took it apart? I jammed the signal. Mallory's surprised face was a sweet reward to Kirk. You had Spock's module sending out a location signal for both modules, so when Spock removed his, it registered as if both had been switched off at the same time. Kirk bowed for the crowd. Thank you, thank you. Mallory reached out and forced Kirk's head back up. I'll say this one more time. You're in real trouble, kid, so cut the smartass routine. But challenging Kirk was like turning on a switch. He pushed Mallory's hand away. Yeah? Well, I can handle trouble. Mallory smiled unpleasantly. And I like a challenge. He grabbed a fistful of Kirk's overalls at the shoulder, yanked Kirk off balance, and flipped open his communicator. Mallory to Sloan Complex Control, 2 to beam to HQ holding. DGS priority Alpha 515, acknowledge. Kirk was left to struggle uselessly, unable to loosen the man's solid grip, furious with his helplessness. You can't beam me anywhere. I have rights. Sloan Complex Control to Mallory, acknowledging your DGS priority Alpha 515. Stand by for force field attenuation. I said let go, Kirk shouted. Help! Help! I'm being kidnapped! The halls remained deserted. Kirk winced in disbelief, as much as in pain, as Mallory shoved him against the wall. You're not being kidnapped, kid. You're being arrested. Energizing. Then Kirk felt the known world disappear as the op center corridor, the bank of maintenance terminals, and everything around him except his captor dissolved into light. A moment later, or perhaps days later, Kirk felt solid feet under his ground again. Or was that solid ground under his feet? He shook his head, disoriented. He looked around. Mallory still stood beside him, his grip still on his shoulder, but everything else was different. For just a moment, he glimpsed the interior of a transporter room. 2 technicians were at a console. Kirk looked down. He was standing on a glowing disc. He looked up. Another glowing disc was above him. Mallory gave him an unsympathetic look. "First time?" Then one of the technicians said, "Energize," and it all happened again. This time when solidity returned, Mallory let go, and Kirk dropped to his knees and retched. "Oh, come on, it's not that bad." Kirk raised his head, wished he hadn't, wiped bitter liquid from his face. "You disintegrated me twice." Mallory hauled Kirk back to his feet. "Well, since I put you back together again both times, we're even." Kirk felt dizzy, but he pretended to be even dizzier, rocking back and forth as he looked around at this new location. He and Mallory had been transported to an open plaza outside Starfleet headquarters. Outside. Kirk hid a smile. Mallory was an idiot. I think I'm going to pass out," Kirk said weakly. He started to wobble. Mallory guided him to the edge of a planter. "Some people are sensitive the first few times, but disorientation should only last a few seconds." Kirk hung his head between his knees, groaned. "Got this inner ear thing. Gonna be sick again." Mallory sighed. "Let me get some help." "Some water?" Kirk moaned. "And some water. Just stay put." Kirk grabbed his stomach and rolled onto his side on the edge of the planter. "I can't move. Why won't it stop spinning?" Mallory went up the stairs, 2 at a time. Mallory's assistant was waiting for him by the main entrance. "Got your priority code?" She pointed out toward the main plaza. "Is that the Kirk kid?" Mallory looked back to see someone in a maintenance uniform racing at top speed toward a subway entrance, expertly weaving in and out between other pedestrians fully recovered. "That's him." "Where's he going in such a hurry?" "He thinks he's escaping from Starfleet." "Ha!" Sally said. "He's got a lot to learn." Mallory looked thoughtful. "So do we. From him." Chapter 24. For Abel Griffin, the best part of being assigned to Earth was that he did not have to fear being killed in his sleep every night. Always a possibility in the camps on the frontier. And then there were the women here. In the camps, the sexes had separate quarters. Fraternization was a reward for both sides, rarely given, but on Earth. When Z. Bailoff appeared in the doorway to his office on the Pacific Rim, Griffin casually reached out and crushed Dalla to his chest. "Interrupting something?" Z asked. Griffin took a moment to enjoy the annoyance and jealousy in her voice. Dalla also knew how to play the scene. Slowly, she stood back from him, letting her hands trail across his chest as she smiled at their visitor, and only then appeared to remember to adjust a seal on her shimmering red skin suit. "Z, Dalla." Z moved to the side so she wouldn't block the door. "Why don't you find another playmate down on deck, unless they're as sick of you as I am?" Dalla looked at Griffin. "I'm not going anywhere, am I?" Griffin waved Dalla over to the battered couch, where she curled up gracefully and blew him a kiss. He came out from behind his desk and sat down on it. He spread his arms wide to welcome Z, knowing how much it would bother Dalla. He hadn't been able to make up his mind between the two, so he hadn't. He loved Earth. "How's my little admiral?" he teased. "I miss your uniform." Z was wearing baggy green pants and a loose jacket that made her shapeless, unremarkable. But Z stayed by the open doorway. "Drop dead." Griffin laughed and let his arms drop to his sides. "You first. Dalla's always telling me no one needs to see a mid hanging around my ship." There was a soft hissing noise from the couch, and Griffin glanced over to see Dalla expertly using a cosmetics wand to touch up the iridescent red butterfly wings painted over her eyes. She smiled. They all smiled. But Z kept her eyes on Griffin. "Kirk's got some new plan for helping Alyssa." Griffin stopped playing. This was business. "So what is it?" They wouldn't tell me, but I watched them take the monorail to the Sloan complex. They won't find anything. The investigators didn't. I don't know about that, but when Alyssa came back without Kirk, she was in a lot better mood. She said she expected the honor board to be postponed and then dropped. I think they did find something, and we both know what it was. Did you take the jammer out of the lab? Me? I can't get in there again. You were going to arrange that. Griffin heaved himself off his desk and moved toward Z. He could feel Dahla's eyes follow every step. But you're my best insider at the academy. For Dahla's benefit, he traced Z's cheek with a long-nailed finger. Ew. My little admiral. Z slapped his hand away. Till this thing gets wrapped up and Alyssa takes the fall for the missing dilithium, I'm not doing anything to draw attention. If you have anyone else at the academy, use them, not me. Griffin stepped back, hooked his hands into his gun belt. We have an arrangement. I've done everything you've asked, but if they catch me taking out the jammer and figure out why, they won't just kick me out of the academy, they'll put me in rehab. Then I'm no good to anyone. And what's the general going to do when he finds out he's lost his best chance for getting a spy in Starfleet because you fouled up? From the couch, Dahla gave a theatrical sigh. Just kill them, Griffey. Griffin didn't appreciate the interruption. Kill who? All of them. Kirk, his brother, no more interference. They're already on the list, Griffin said, but first, he ruffled Z's hair. Z's right. I need to protect the general property here. Alyssa has to be tagged for the dilithium, officially, and after that, well, accidents will happen. Just as Z knocked his hand away again, Griffin heard the sound of multiple laser shots hum from the cargo deck and voices shout for someone to stay where he was. Griffin whipped over to the slanting windows, hand going to the laser pistol holstered on his belt. He froze as he saw the kids on the deck swarm a tall, dark-haired teenager in a black cloak. As the kids dragged him away from the holographic wall, the teenager's long hair flew up and... Dahla, Griffin said, get over here. He pointed at Z. You! Stay away from the window. Dahla was beside him at once. Is that your Vulcan? Spock! Dahla exclaimed. That little creep. If I find out he followed you here... Griffin pounded his fist on the window and the kids on the deck looked up. Hold him there! I'm coming down! All the machinery on the cargo deck was correctly powered off when Griffin stormed down the metal staircase with Dahla in tow. His 5 guards, the general's best, aged 12 to 15, had their laser rifles trained on the captured Vulcan. 2 of his mechanics, both 16 and muscular, secured him with arm holds. Even one of his 8-year-olds was brandishing a flash driver in hopes of using it as a weapon if the Vulcan teenager tried anything. The rest of his gang of kids had formed a wall between their prey and any escape route. Griffin looked to the back of the cargo deck to make certain his other visitors of the day had the presence of mind to stay out of sight, then told his mechanics to let their prize go. The instant they released their arm holds, Spock straightened, apparently unhurt and unperturbed by the sudden violence of his capture. He just walked through the screen and started yammering, one of Griffin's guards reported. I merely asked to meet with you, Abel Griffin, Spock corrected. Griffin hated Vulcans. Their lack of fear was disconcerting. He yanked Dahla closer. You mean me or your girlfriend here? She is not my girlfriend, Spock said. I did not expect her to be here. I came to speak to you. How'd you know where to find me? You have dealings with my father. Griffin didn't know what Spock meant by that. Do I? His name is Sarek. He works at the Vulcan Embassy. 5 times in the past 68 days, my father has come here to sell you a valuable artifact which he has stolen from the collection in the... Griffin suddenly realized what was going on, needed to cut this short. I thought you were the one selling them. The Vulcan teenager's steady gaze flickered for an instant. I sold one to this woman, he said. You working for your father? Now Griffin saw Spock's impassive expression change again, this time to confusion. What kind of Vulcan is this kid? At the time I sold the artifact, I did not know Sarek had sold others. Quite a coincidence, Griffin said, intrigued. 2 thieves in one family, and a Vulcan one at that? Now Spock plainly looked indignant. "I am not a thief." But as soon as he'd said those words, he appeared to regret them. Griffin was amazed. He had never seen any Vulcan react this way. He tightened his grip on Dalla, who glared at him and hissed, "I told you he was different." "So, Spock, how would you know how to find me?" Griffin felt Dalla's body become rigid beside him. Spock hesitated, as if making certain what he said next was appropriate. His face returned to typical Vulcan blankness. "This location was encrypted in my father's computer." "Very good." "I do not understand why you would think it was good that evidence of your illegal dealings exists in a computer in the Vulcan compound." "Someday I'm sure you'll figure it out." Griffin held out a hand to one of his guards holding a laser rifle, snapped his fingers. "Disruptor." "What did you give my father in return for the stolen artifacts?" The guard tossed Griffin a Klingon hand weapon. It was an ugly thing with dangerously sharp, diamond-shaped blades on the side to be used as a slashing weapon when the power cell was exhausted. Griffin checked the weapon's settings. "Your father has, let's call them needs that Vulcans aren't supposed to have." He showed the disruptor setting to his guard. "Is this for heavy stun?" "One more notch," the teenager said. "Oh, right. I keep getting those little number things mixed up." Griffin nodded his thanks. "Glad I checked. I would have set his ears on fire with that one." "What needs?" Spock asked hesitantly. With his free hand, Griffin shoved Dalla away from him. She quickly moved to take cover behind the guards. "Dalla could give you all the sordid details of the recordings she made of all the special ways she paid your father, but you might be too young to know." Spock regarded him in stunned silence. I do not believe you." "Ask me if I care," Griffin said. He aimed the disruptor at Spock and fired. Spock dropped to the stained metal decking with a clang. Griffin tossed the disruptor back to his teenage guard. "Tell Kest and Strad to get out of here." Or to get out here. The young guard ran aft, skirting around the remains of several unidentifiable machines that had been scavenged for parts. He returned in under a minute with 2 consular agents from the Vulcan embassy who'd concealed themselves when Spock arrived. Griffin studied the 2 agents. He'd been dealing with them for the year he'd been on Earth, and they behaved like Vulcans were supposed to. They betrayed no sign of what they thought or felt at seeing one of their own collapsed on the deck unconscious. "Either of you know this guy?" "Spock, son of Sarek," Kess said. "He said his father works at the embassy." "That is correct," Strad confirmed. "Sarek is a diplomatic attaché for scientific outreach and the development of unaligned worlds." "And he's the mark you set up." "Correct. We knew discovery of our thefts would be inevitable. Therefore, we placed incriminating evidence in Sarek's computer so that when an investigation began, he would be suspected." Griffin walked over to look down at Spock. "But Sarek's kid found the evidence first." "Apparently so. I told him that if he went public with what he found, I'd release some recordings that would ruin his father's reputation." The 2 Vulcans stared at him blankly. "The nature of the proceedings?" Kest asked. Griffin pointed his thumbs at Dalla. "Sarek and Dalla, you know." "Know what?" Strad asked. Sometimes Griffin couldn't get over how dense Vulcans were. You know, getting together. Vulcans do that, right?" Strad looked at Kest, who nodded. "Yes," Strad said. Griffin could feel his neck getting red. He spelled it out for them. "So, are these recordings enough of a threat to keep the kid quiet about coming here?" The 2 agents looked at each other again, as if in telepathic conversation. Kest was the first to speak. "It is unlikely Spock would believe you." Griffin rubbed his hands over his face. "That means I have to kill him." But, Kest went on, "if you could manufacture an image that appeared to be from such a recording, it could take several days for Spock to confirm it is false." "Even then," Strad said, "the possibility that fraudulent recordings of his father could be disturbed on Earth would be enough to keep him from reporting what he has found to the authorities." Griffin stared at the two consular agents for a moment, trying to decide if their solution came out of logic or some buried emotional need to say anything that would stop him from killing Spock. But in the end, he decided it didn't matter. 5 more days and we'll be finished here. If he talks after that, who cares? Can you get me some images of Sarek? They both answered, yes. Will you make sure the kid sees them? Yes. Griffin gave Spock's inert form a vicious kick and felt no response. And get him out of here. Take his communicator and leave him on a corner somewhere. It'll give him time to think on the long walk home. As the two Vulcans lifted Spock to his feet, Griffin's own communicator chirped. He checked the identifier code on a small display. This day just keeps getting better, he said. Sam Kirk was calling.